flip that on, all
Okay.
those earthquakes in Christchurch.
This is what I'm listening
Yeah,
to.
those are scalar type systems. Scalar meaning a type of electromagnetic pulse that's faster than the speed of light. It may have been an inadvertent result, but they also know it could be used that way. I have a guy who was a contract agent, private, with one of these systems that was sent down over the subduction zone where the bad Indonesian earthquake and tsunami happened that killed 250,000 people. He was on the ship where they detonated not a kinetic bomb, but an electromagnetic scalar pulse that caused that earthquake fault to subduct, slip, that caused that earthquake. Absolutely, that can be done. Our military whistleblower, who is the U-2 spy plane pilot that you all saw, Colonel Heckert, not to be confused with Hecker, he told me very directly that before they had those, they had a nuclear bomb-tipped torpedoes sitting on fault lines that they could detonate that would cause earthquakes to be set off. Putin has directly mentioned this and said that if the United States gets in his way too much, he'll inundate it with tidal waves. So I think the public does need to know why. Because not to create fear, but to create motivation to act, because everyone is too apathetic. They don't realize that having these sorts of organizations and technologies without the oversight of the people or even the people's representatives. I mean, I'm looking at the White House right here at the top of the Capitol dome right there from my condo here in Washington. And I'm going, well, if all those people don't know anything and the public doesn't know anything, and therefore they're not taking action, I've always said, power abhors a vacuum. So we've created our apathetic vacuum, and in that vacuum has stepped some very bad actors. And if you're going to fix the problem, you can't be passive. You have to be active, proactive, not violent, but proactive. And at a certain point, you have to be willing to engage law enforcement if in fact, all other approaches fail. Because what you can't allow, I mean, imagine if somebody had stopped Adolf Hitler and his inner circle, before the Holocaust and World War II. It wouldn't have been 6 million lives saved. It would have been 20 to 30 million lives saved. So at a certain point, if you have this kind of knowledge, which I have, and others that I'm sharing this with now have in the Congress and the Pentagon, you have a responsibility. You can't sit back and just go, oh, well, screw it. Because I think that, there's this old saying, there are the sins of omission, the things you do that you regret when you die. The bigger ones are the sins of omission. It's what you didn't do that you should have done. That when you review your life, I could have done this, and you didn't. So I'm saying this to everyone listening, you need to have a talk with yourself about what are you doing, and what are you doing to resolve these huge problems, whether it's peace on Earth and in space, contact with these civilizations that are peaceful, the CE5 contact effort, the disclosure effort, being involved in getting your representatives to listen and look at this material and take the time to get really deepened in it. Everyone needs to sort of take some responsibility, even if you have other interests, careers, and hobbies. I mean, I gave up my medical career as an emergency doctor to fix this problem. And that means you're giving up $500,000 a year and making nothing like we are. But it's never been about that for me. It's been about making change happen, avoiding the worst outcome and in replacing it with a beautiful outcome. And so this vision of a future where we have free energy, this is why everyone should go look at the lost century and how to reclaim it. The subcaption is how to reclaim it. Yeah. So the lost century really unpacks a whole century of these wonderful technologies that have been ruthlessly suppressed, but also gives people a pathway of how to bring them out. Open source it, bring it out. And we also, though, need people who can fund a research lab to develop them.
Are we any closer today?
Well, we're forming a corporate entity that can take in investment funds. We have aligned to a few people who are interested in supporting it. Nobody's made that commitment because I would not initiate an effort like that without having between $50 and $100 million, simply because to do a proper high energy, high voltage physics lab, and to do this properly, if you do it with less, you're probably going to fail. So, in a world where every week there's a unicorn $1 billion startup company being funded in Silicon Valley, I find it hard to believe that articulating this and putting the evidence we have in front of some people can't result in some serious funding. But we'll see. I mean, so far, there's discussions, but, what is that Jerry Maguire movie, Show Me the Money, I'll believe it. One of the problems is, just be frank, is that everyone's curious about this, but a lot of people are afraid to get involved. And then the other part of it is our plan is, in the first phase of this technology, open source it, no patents, no intellectual property holdback, because we don't have time to play that game. And that game will result in the technology being confiscated by the patent office. So you have to open source it very quickly. Now, after that happens, there'll be thousands of companies that'll take that basic platform, proof of principle device. It's now the plans are on the internet, and it works. It's not fake like most of them. And you're going to have dozens and dozens of companies bigger than Apple will sprout up, because you have 8 billion people living like they are in the 1800s. And to make 8 billion people, to allow them to have technologies, you're talking 15 to 20 years if almost all industrial capacity switched to free energy, 0-point energy systems tomorrow. And we barely have 20 years of the environmental problem, and the also Malthusian dilemma of 8 billion people, half of whom don't have any means to live without cutting down rainforests and burning up shrubs in the desert to cook their food. That's 3 billion of the 8 billion people on Earth literally don't have any way of cooking their food except burning things, cutting down shrubs and trees. So in a world like that, you really need a global, what I call it's like a global Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan is when we rebuilt Europe after World War II, and it was a huge effort. But we need a global one for anti-poverty and the environment and sustainability, but not using things that cost so much, like solar panels and windmills and Tesla cars that have 900 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in them that pollute like crazy and are being plugged in, and their energy is coming from a coal-fired and gas-fired power grid for 80% of that energy. So we have to come up with these high-tech solutions if we're going to save the future of humanity. And that's what the Lost Century makes a very, I think, strong case for. So I recommend everyone look at that and get everyone else to look at it and network two things. Here's another action call.
Yeah.
You know how I am. It's all call to action. Help us find somebody who has a legitimate system. And I think I have people now who would be able to provide enough funding to them to basically get them to open source it with us. Now, I will say over 30 years, I've seen a few devices that seem legitimate, but they wouldn't open source them. They want to keep it secret and become the next Rockefeller of energy. And all of those people were killed or died or took it to the grave. Every one of them. The rest are all frauds. 90+% of everything you hear about this on the internet are fraudulent devices that are there to separate the foolish from their money. And I personally was foolish enough to have lost about $1 million, on people who had very clever little tricks and schemes. And so now I'm seasoned about what to look for. Yeah. But you learn from your mistakes, my friends. So you better. Because they're costly mistakes. And so the other part of it is to help us find people who can provide the funding. There are thousands of billionaires in the world and hundreds of thousands of people with hundreds of millions of dollars. We just need to find a few people who have enough resources to support this effort under sort of an angel funding initiative initially. Doesn't mean that later, in a second or third phase of it, obviously there are all kinds of companies that are going to have to be building these things and selling them, right? And so that'll be a multi-$100 trillion industry going down the road. But at this stage, it needs to be more of an angel funding initiative because it's very high risk, but very high reward. And I have no doubt that it could be done if we had the funding sources in place. And because we could hire some of the most brilliant physicists and electromagnetic engineers and put them all in one place, our goal would be to have a lab that would be live streamed so the public could see what's going on. So you couldn't shut it down, transparent. And then also hubs all over the world of other scientists, whether it's material sciences, specialized materials, electromagnetic specialists, physicists, who could then collaborate, kind of like GitHub, the software entity, and could collaborate. So if you had a problem, instead of taking a year to fix it, it could be fixed in 2 to 3 weeks, right? Because you can then collaborate. And of course, setting all that up, managing it, all that is expensive. You're not going to do that for, we can crowdfund our documentaries for a few $100,000, but you can't do this. So we need to find some people who can help us with that. So those two things, so, A, help us find someone with an operational device that's not brick. Good luck. Or B, or help us find the funding to start this research lab, which with funds in place, we could then sort of acquire an existing technology if it's legit, or just build one from scratch. Because I do have a CIA a CD. It was John Bedini was allowed to copy thousands of pages of seized patents and devices. And as a way for this CIA officer, Sajaki, was enticing him to join his little group. And Benini ended up not doing that, but he copied all these things, and they thought it was just in paper, but he digitized it, and it's on a CD. Now, Bedini is dead, and my dear friend Tony Craddock passed away last year, but I have a copy of that. Now, out of all that, which of those things work and how they work, and taking them from a two-dimensional design to a three-dimensional device, you need a team of people working on that. So, but we wouldn't be starting at zero. If anyone's listening who actually has any resources, we most certainly wouldn't be starting at zero. We have a great deal of intelligence and information. But, I think to be able to get anything like that working, you need such specialized equipment, and you don't want to take 20 years of tinkering around like T. Henry Moray or if you look at the film, the Floyd Suite, they call him Sparky. It took him forever to develop that by himself, and then he got it operational. And if you look at the Lost Century, you'll see this thing. It looks a little bit bigger than a cigarette pack, and it could put out enough electricity to run a 300 horsepower motor so that your car, and it never had to be plugged in. Once it was turned on, it was pulling energy out of the 0 point, ran indefinitely. And that ended up being confiscated. He dropped dead suddenly because he kept it secret. Big mistake. Here's a lesson. If you have something like this, it's the hottest potato in the universe, get it disclosed. And hand it over, we'll disclose it. I'll ask every celebrity I know to disclose it on their Instagram and social media, and we'll make 20 of them so that Demi Lovato or Tom Cruise or Ariana Grande or whoever is driving around in a free energy car, you can just retrofit a Tesla, take all those hundreds of pounds of batteries out. You'd have one of this little thing and a 300-400 horsepower motor, and off it would go. You could actually take the charging thing and solder it closed. You could prove it's never being charged. That's what you can do. So, and that's how you get this out even without the cooperation of CNN or Fox or the New York Times. So it goes out through social media, by a bunch of celebrity influencers. And then, how do you put that toothpaste back in the bottle? You can't, it's squeezed out. So that's one of our strategies is that disclosing, having the technology, that's one problem. And people have had it since before Nikola Tesla. But disclosing it in a way that 1 billion or 2 billion people find out about it very quickly, that is another matter. And that's expensive. To set up a team, a media, PR, social media team. To do that properly is huge. Not to mention the fact that if it isn't dropped by certain key celebrities and influencers, they will ban your site and just take it down. As you know, I mean, the big tech giants. Everyone I know who works in both Hollywood and Silicon Valley, it's a great quote. They all talk like hippies, but act like Nazis. They're totally fascistic. They look hip. They love lattes and driving Teslas, but when it comes right down to it, they're going to ban your free speech. They're going to take you offline. They're going to cancel your account. They're going to shadow ban you. Like we posted on my YouTube channel once, the testimony of a man, Powlett. It's still up there. And he was disclosing how they in the old days, in the 70s, 80s, had these RF frequency chips that they were putting in people to do the abductions and what have you. When we released that, within a week, it had 680,000 views with no promotion. And in one day, it went from that to 6,750. They basically just chopped off digits. Yep. And that took it out of the algorithm of something popular. Now, anyone who thinks the tech companies don't do that, I've got a London Bridge I'll sell you this afternoon if you're that gullible. So unfortunately, that's the truth about big tech now. So that's why you need people who are very well known. You need celebrities and famous people who they can't pull that stunt with them.
I want to double back to a very real concern that you mentioned the last time that we spoke. That I think I'm not fear mongering today. I want to go into love and into light, and there's a lot that we can do here. But you mentioned the asteroid, and then you mentioned that we got assistance, thankfully, which is why so many of us living on the coast are still here, for instance. But then you mentioned last time also with scalar technologies, hidden technologies that are out there that are faster than the speed of light. In fact, don't even have to pay attention to the speed of light because of the way we can fold the universe. That if we don't we'll use quote unquote, get our act together quickly, those not little green men, but extraterrestrial beings who I believe would like the best for us may not be able to help us.
Well, they can't if we keep setting up more and more advanced systems that keep them from being able to intervene and help. So this is a big risk. I mean, I actually brought that up to General Patrick Hughes, who was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency back over 20 years ago, that there's an inherent unrecognized risk of a group with these sort of technologies attacking ET vehicles, because there are many events, both nuclear accidents that could have triggered World War III, as well as asteroid and seismic events that have been mitigated in a very unseen way by these extraterrestrial civilizations that really are wanting the best for humanity and the Earth, but are increasingly, frankly, fed up, just like these Pentagon people are, with this covert group that's targeting them. Now, I mean, there's a black site. I know a man who is a senior manager of it, that every year knocks down 2 or 3 extraterrestrial vehicles still using these weapon systems. And that is a really terrible thing, because these civilizations, I tell people, with all the fear mongering there is on the internet about aliens, if they were really hostile, given what their technological advantage is and has been, they would have just shut down this little experiment, right? I mean, it would have just been over very quickly, in a fraction of a second. That's not their intent. They are, however, increasingly, my information from them, very upset and concerned that no one in the powers of that be in the United States or other countries have put these illegal madmen on a leash. Because here's the other problem, to be honest with you, Michael. Everyone thinks technology stands still, so everyone's fighting the last war, is the expression. But there has been a technological curve, you know, from the 40s and 50s, and in 1954, October, we had gravity control, I mean, anti-gravity, and then it went nonlinear. So you figured almost 70 years after we mastered gravity control, and they've continued to target and knock down and study extraterrestrial vehicles that are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years more advanced. So with the kind of money they have, which is virtually unlimited, and the smartest scientists I've ever met who are plucked out of high school and early days of college to work on these projects, you end up with some unbelievable breakthroughs in technology on many fronts. And neither the White House nor the Congress nor the American people know about this, but this group of very sociopathic bad actors have it. And that is a risk that you can't overstate how dangerous that is. It's much more dangerous than the threat of Iran, China, or Russia. And I have said that. Just what I said to you, I have said at meetings at the Senate and with members of the House and the White House military officers.
What kind of technologies are we? I don't think that my brain can even cronk how far ahead a technology could be because I'm rooted in here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always. Let's go back to what Jim Goodall said when he came up on stage during that 2-day conference before the National Press Club event in June. And Jim Goodall is a very famous aerospace mainstream historian and researcher. And he was one of the last people to speak to the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, alive. He was dying of cancer. The week he died, he spoke with Ben Rich. And Jim Goodall said that he asked about this issue again. And he said, yeah, well, out in the desert, not Area 51, but the Lockheed Skunk Works, we have things that you can look at Star Trek, and anything you see there, we've done it. Materialization, dematerialization, teleportation, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. And another good example, honestly, is this new, very badly tortured and injured military hero, Stephen Digna, who came forward. And he was with the Raytheon guys and was shown these craft that were triangular shaped at that Port Irwin, California back in 2000. And he subsequently was abducted by Raytheon, and the craft that came right over the tip of his car, if you look at the illustrations, but listen to what he says, I would say if 1 million people heard his account, they would think it was an extraterrestrial craft. The thing had an organic living nature. It purred. It moved and reacted when you touched it. It was 100% man-made. So we're talking nanobiotechnology, and at a very, very high level of trans-dimensional physics, all this. So some of these more advanced, that was 23 years ago. Some of these advanced technologies are so advanced in terms of the development. It's way beyond a flying saucer from the 50s, 60s, many of which were man-made. They're reaching the point of almost being indistinguishable from an extraterrestrial vehicle. That's dangerous, because the question is going to be, if people had an encounter with that object and the people on it, and the object itself, the way it behaved and interacted, I would say almost everyone on planet Earth, from the White House to the president on down, would swear that was extraterrestrial, and it wasn't. It was Raytheon. So I think this is a real problem, is this educational gap, which we're trying to close. The issue with that, and I'm acutely aware of it, 1991, I had an intelligence official came to me and he said, He said, Dr. Greer, if you tell the public the truth that you know about this, it will discredit you because the truth is much less believable than the fiction we've been selling. The truth is much less believable. It's much stranger and it's much less believable.
Love you, baby.
And they're counting on that. So behind the curtain of all this R&D that Ben Rich alluded to Jim Goodall, and that Stephen Digna saw firsthand, and other people on our team have seen firsthand, because the public doesn't know about it. But worse, your chain of command in the military, in my country, Canada, all over the world, those people don't know about it either. We're trying to get them informed. But they just go, God, that can't be. We can't have something like that. We do. Like even that Tic Tac and those things off the coast of California, everybody's seen the footage. When I first talked to David Fravor, who is the jet pilot who was at the hearing, he said, there's no way that's ours. I said, well, it is. It's the Skunk Works. And we can prove it. And, but he said, well, he was a jet pilot. Well, jets are from the 30s, 40s. Rockets are from the 40s. I said, technology hasn't stood still. But if your whole world is flying an F-18 fighter jet or Hornet, you're not going to have any foundation for something that's trans-dimensional, anti-gravity, da-da-da-da-da, that's from the Skunk Works, or for these deep black operations at Northrop Grumman or Raytheon or any number of other places, SAIC, EG&G. So I said the problem is that even your most experienced aviators and military people, they don't have any foundation for being able to understand these objects and how they move, or to distinguish a man-made one from an ET one. And see, that lack of being able to distinguish between the two is where they can ram a false flag right down the middle of that, right? So again, knowledge is power. We have very little time to get everyone up to speed. But the problem is, Michael, to be honest with you, because I've been doing this for 30 years, you have to take people, like when I first briefed the CIA director for Mr. Clinton, he didn't know anything. He was denied access, as was Clinton. So you have to go from knowing nothing to this bizarre stuff that at the CIA, they call it WSFM. It stands for Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. In my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, they just call it PFM. He just said it's just pure magic, excuse my language. But that's what it is that PFM or WSFM. Hey, baby.
It's funny that the language comes up and then all of a sudden, here comes the magic future.
Yeah, well, exactly. Hey, baby. How are you? How old is she?
She turns 16 months tomorrow, don't you? Yeah, is that so?
Yeah, we have 12 grandchildren, a couple of them like this age.
And that's got to be part of your motivation.
It was always my motivation is the future, and it's the children of Earth, all of us, adult Earth children. And it's, I have 4 children and 12 grandkids. And you look at, most people in the world just want to have a good life and peaceful and have family and grow and evolve. And even the ones who aren't interested in evolving, they don't want, to have the world destroyed around them. And the only way that's going to happen, though, is for people to wake up and put their shoulder to the wheel. She's adorable. Is she walking a lot?
She's running.
Running.
We're going to go right after this to a large playground. And she just will burn rubber across the synthetic grass there.
Of course. Yay.
You got to keep a close eye on her. I know.
My grandkids call me Papa. I'm just Papa to them.
Oh.
And my wife is Muzzy.
Papa and Muzzy.
That's it. My wife and I joke, it's the Papa and Muzzy show is what we're doing.
I like that. So going back real briefly, and then I want to send people one more time to your website and leave on a message of hope.
Oh yeah.
Did you want one of these? Well, so you were talking about weird WI. The CIA, weird science and magic. What was it? What do we have?
WSFM, Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. Yeah, WS. It sounds like a radio station in Cincinnati, but it's not. Mm-hmm. And this is the kind of technology that the science and tech people, with the agency that are read into this, and these corporates, the guys, they know about it and they use it all the time. But it's trick people. It's very easy to trick people if they don't know. But see, here's the thing: if people do know, it sort of takes the teeth out of that. It's, I liken this to, Michael, it's like, have you ever seen The Wizard of Oz, that movie? And the behind the curtain of this scary thing, there's this old crudmudgeon, old white-haired man. They pull the curtain back, and there he is, scaring the bejeebies out of everybody. I liken the crowd who are running these technologies and scaring people about aliens and abductions and this and that. They're sort of like the Wizard of Oz. And Dorothy and the Scarecrow, meaning us, we the people, haven't yet pulled the curtain back. So now what we all need to do is learn about this and pull the curtain back, and pull the curtain back so that, our leaders, but also the general public knows about it, even though it's rather strange.
Yeah. But what gives you the greatest hope right now?
I think the greatest hope is the people who are surfacing all over the world in all walks of life, government, private, military folks, special forces people in the Congress, all coming together around resolving this, and who increasingly understand the whole big picture that I've described in the last hour and a half for your folks. So I think that's very hopeful. And I think that the other thing I think that's very hopeful are the number of people who understand, and this was the purpose of us releasing this summer while all this disclosure activity is going on, part of the reason for the secrecy, but also what a beautiful world. If you look at, what we did towards the end of the film of The Lost Century, and we show the world 20 years from now, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, it just becomes this paradise. Because in one generation, we could end poverty, all pollution, and the damage that's been done to the earth, we could reverse a lot of it, if not most of it. So to me, that's a message of great hope. So on the one hand, we're going to be in very bad shape if we stay on the path we're on. But if we can make this course correction, bring the technologies out, make peaceful contact with the ETs, which everyone can do if you get the CE5 contact app at your app store, with Google or iPhone, you can learn how to be an ambassador to these civilizations. And now we have millions of people doing that. And so that creates a force field in non-local consciousness in the conscious field to support the thinking, because we're all of us are wired into this great mind, the great spirits. And the more that humans begin to move in a positive direction, it affects, it's called that Maharishi effect, but it affects everyone that you don't even know them, but it still moves their consciousness and their thinking in a positive direction. So that's the power of meditation, prayer. Doing CE5 contact creates sort of a morphogenic field, as Rupert Sheldrake talks about, that actually affects everyone in your area and in the world that you may not know. So that's the other thing everyone can do, and I think is a very positive trend. What we're seeing now is that we have just more and more people doing CE5 all over the world. At the same time, we're working to have this disclosure happen in a safe way and keep it on track so it doesn't go in the direction of Alien Invasion Week on the History Channel or something. And so I think those are all very positive trends. It's why I'm working 7 days a week now.
Thank you. A quick question, then I want to know where people can go to find everything right now. There's this term, it's interesting, it's term of control, and I never realized it was a term in control until I'm speaking to you right now. The term is skeptic. Well, I'm a natural skeptic, or I'm a scientist, so then I've been trained to be a skeptic.
Good. I am too.
What does that term mean to you, and how do we go past the skepticism that's been indoctrinated in us?
Well, skepticism is different from denial. So in other words, a true scientist actually wants to know the truth. And they're going to follow the facts and the evidence where it takes them, even if it runs counter to their indoctrination, education, prejudices. So to be a dispassionate seeker of the truth is to be a scientist. And a true scientist is not going to deny the facts because they don't comport with their understanding of the universe. And this is a big problem because if you are a skeptic, I'm a skeptic. If you listen to me, there's about 90% of everything out there on this subject that I'm deeply skeptical of in terms of its origin. What most people think is alien, I know to be counterintelligence human operations. So you have to be skeptical, but it doesn't mean that you're closed-minded. Now, what normally happens, people say I'm skeptical because I'm a scientist, and that's a really a cop-out. It's really a way of them saying, I don't think this can be true, and if it is true, I should know about it because I'm so important, right? When that's not scientific. A true scientist, and look, we have put enough facts and evidence out to make this a bulletproof case, but if someone doesn't look at the facts, they don't look at the testimony, they don't look at the government documents, they don't look at the photos, the videos, the landing trace elements, the radar cases. And if you just take all of that and say none of this exists, I'm a skeptic and I'm a scientist, you're just using skepticism and scientific credentials as a way of being in denial. So I make a big difference between valid skepticism and closed-minded denial.
Thank you. You just triggered one last thing here. What's being put out by the Pentagon right now? There's a website that just went live, I believe, as of yesterday.
The head of that Aero office that I've been, very much involved with bringing top secret whistleblowers through that system. Sean Kirkpatrick is in a bit of trouble. And the reason it's been kicked up to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, a woman who is one of the highest ranking people in the Pentagon, because he has not put forward to the public or to the members of Congress the full scope of the evidence and testimony he's collected. And this is why Senator Warner and Senator Rubio, the chair and co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, wrote a rather reprimanding letter to him not long ago, because we sort of blew the whistle on that. And said, look, we know for a fact there are people who've gone in there to testify to the extraterrestrial material and this and that. And then he's denied all that to the public. So the Pentagon, I think the reason why the members of the House want to have an open hearing is because the Pentagon at the Aero office, which was set up and funded by Congress to be a truthful investigation, has started getting involved in covering things up again. And so they have a big problem with that. So the site that they put up, if you look at it, it doesn't include any of the documents and evidence that I know has been sent in there. And I will tell everyone listening very carefully, we sent to that office the entire 1 or 2 terabytes of top secret witness testimony, documents, and evidence that we have. Right before our National Press Club event in June. They have it. It's the unredacted one, meaning all the names are in there, all the locations, all the black sites, everything. So when they tell the public, we don't have any evidence for this, this, and this, that is a bull-faced lie.
Where can people go, Stephen, to find out more, to find everything, and that website that then can help them to help everyone?
Yeah, you can go to drstephengreer.com or SiriusDisclosure.com. They go to the same site. And it's SIRIUS disclosure.com. And you can see The Lost Century on Amazon or any of the sites, Google or Apple, iTunes. You can see the film, go to our site. You can learn about everything we're doing, and go to our YouTube